Hi, Modupe. This is Neil from Dorkaholics.
Excellent. Good to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I loved watching the stress episode, especially because I am someone with a lot of stress myself. I guess my first question is, working with Chris Hemsworth, um, how was his, I guess, adoption of your tips about handling stress? Did he meet what you were expecting, or he surpassed those expectations?
Yeah, I think that he met my expectations and in some ways surpassed them too, partially because he is a highly motivated person and wanted to make it work. Wanted like the drown proofing experience. You saw that part of it where the special forces folks are like, you failed. And Chris is not a person who likes to fail. He really wants to make it work. And so it's always fun working with people who are up for a challenge.
Mhm. I know you're also a professor at Columbia Business School, so you interact mostly with future, I guess, high performance executives and so on and so forth. Um, what are some of the most impactful techniques that those kinds of individuals can apply to their own daily lives in order to cope with natural stress?
Well, one of the techniques is actually just reminding them to acknowledge their stress and to change the dominant narrative we have about stress. Everyone says stress is bad, avoid it, reduce it, run away from it, deny it. And instead, I try to teach my students and the executives I work with to acknowledge their stress. It exists, to welcome it. It's there because they care about something. And that since stress was designed to facilitate, our bodies are supposed to have these reactions that it does to situations that are uncertain or might seem dangerous or have some fear element in it. And so in some ways, if we kind of trust our bodies and rise to the occasion when we experience stress, or trust that our bodies will rise to the occasion, our mind will rise to the occasion when we experience stress, then we'll all be better off.
Mm,
So the two key things are stress is not always bad, and that you can control your reaction to it and your experience with stress to have the outcomes you desire.
mhm. And on a similar note, what's the one thing that people should be doing more of in handling their stress that they're not doing enough?
Um, I think one of the biggest things that people don't do enough of is ask themselves what they need. So when
Mm,
you're feeling really stressed, sometimes you like just go and call someone you're venting or you whatever. But if you turn inwards and say, what do I need right now? And I found when I ask people to ask themselves that, there's usually a pretty simple answer. Well, what I really need is for somebody to go with me to my house closing. What I really need is a hug. What I really need is for somebody to sit here and listen while I just vent. What I really need is to cry. What I really need is to breathe because I feel like my chest is like imploding or whatever. So ask yourself what you need. And I would also say breathe
mhm. Yeah,
because just breathe, just breathe. It changes kind of how you experience your environment in the moment. And these are things you have control over. Sometimes we wait for somebody else. We're stressed because our boss did this. No, let's focus on what you have control over. That thing is you, your body, and your mind. So use that.
Yeah, I saw that the box breathing technique that Chris Hemsworth learned was very effective in calming himself down for
Yeah.
the little thing behind me.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, I love it. I thought that was what it was. I was like, oh, that scene looks very familiar. Yeah.
A lot more enjoyable for the person on the ground, right?
Yes, exactly. But he did it. Well, in watching the series, the funniest part and the scariest part is when you turn around,
Mhm.
when it's time to go back, and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, even in the virtual reality spot, doing that in virtual reality, turning around is the hardest part. But just remembering to breathe through it is one of the easiest tools we have that we can use.
Mhm. I'm curious, maybe I missed it, but was there a part during filming where Chris was asked, "Hey, what do you really need right now?" Or he was just, "I don't want to get it done."
Well, you know what? There wasn't a true moment where I had to ask him that, but I do think Me continuing to repeat to him, just breathe, just take things one step at a time, was me interpreting that what is needed is not to think about the long game, but to really, what you need is, okay, one step, one step, one step. So explicitly, I didn't say anything. I didn't ask what he needed, but it was kind of implicit in the ways in which I was coaching him.
I'm curious how you apply the things you teach to your own life. What's one
single day? Sorry, go ahead and ask the question.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, what's one way that you practice confronting stress head on?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there are times where I know I'm very distracted and I have a lot going on, and I just pause and breathe. Like, you can tell, well, now people will be able to can tell in meetings if I feel like, if I notice when I'm stressed, because you'll see me like to just, again, regulate my body. I do regularly try to remind myself to ask, what do I need? What do I need? Sometimes I know what I need and I don't give it to myself. So that's another thing that I need to work on. But I think those are the two things that I rely on the most, is the breathing, asking myself what I need, and then sometimes just like closing the laptop and going to bed, you know? And I would also say asking for help, because sometimes we're stressed because we're taking it all on our own. But there are people around us that can help us in so many ways. And maybe it's that we worry about being vulnerable, or we worry that people are, going to feel like you're one of those people that ask them for too much. It's usually not the case. People want to help you. So asking for help. So those are the three things that I would say that I try to put into practice.
And then I know we talked about earlier before that there's a necessary shift in mindset around stress and accepting it as a natural part of everyday life. I know for some people it's very hard to like cross that threshold. What are some specific tips in that to help people kind of realize it's natural?
Yeah. Well, one thing is to ask or have people think about a time where they were stressed and the outcome went wonderfully, went how they had hoped it went. Because if you keep recalling those times, then you realize, oh, stress isn't always bad. What we typically do is remember all the bad times. But no, we have more times where our stress facilitated our performance than when it was debilitating. So it just recalling that and knowing that you can channel your stress for good outcomes is something that I think people could do more of, and that I would recommend.
And then my final question is, Modupe, I can tell that you're very passionate and really focused on this topic of stress. Where does this come from?
I like to say that stress is in my DNA. I'm a child of immigrants, and when you come to a country and don't know the language as well, the people as well, the culture, the norms, you don't have family, you don't have support, then that means that you deal with a lot of stress. And so I absorbed it as a child in watching my parents, but I had to learn as an adult that I need to be able to have a different type of relationship with the stress. My parents both have high blood pressure. And if I want to be able to kind of combat that trend and not have it myself, then I need to do more in adjusting and adapting to the stress that's all around me. So that's a piece of why I study this and why it's important to me to work on my own stress levels and to share with others how to be present with their stress.
No, I love that, being a child of immigrants myself. But thank you so much for your time today, Modupe. Really love seeing the episode and getting to know you today as well.
Same here. Thanks so much, Neil.